Welcome to Unchained TV's live trial coverage of the trial of Wayne Hsiung, co-founder of Direct Action Everywhere, being put on trial for trespass and conspiracy to trespass in Sonoma County, California. He is the one remaining defendant. There were many others, but prosecutors have been quoted as saying they want to cut the head off the snake of essentially the open rescue movement, which is basically defined by people feeling that they have a right to rescue sick and suffering animals in factory farms. This defendant has been gagged, barred from talking to the media, and even a sketch artist has been told she cannot sketch. The prosecutors, witnesses, the judge, the court staff, the jurors, the bailiff, the observers in the gallery. Who's left? Since Wayne might actually take the stand in his own defense, since he's defending himself, he's also a witness. He's a defendant, but he is defending himself. Judge Laura Passaglia, her rulings have raised eyebrows and made people wonder what is going on here. So we have got team coverage of what's going on. I can tell you right now that already the first witness for the prosecution has revealed that one factory farm alone produces up to 500,000 eggs per day, using about 500,000 birds. You know, maybe that's where it all starts going wrong. Is there any way for one factory farm to raise 500,000 birds and have them all treated humanely? That's a question that perhaps the jurors might be asking themselves. Let's go straight out to Carla Cabral, our reporter on the scene, who is also a member of Direct Action Everywhere outside court in Sonoma County, California. Tell us, what's the latest? We've had opening statements. We've got the jury, obviously, so that happens before opening statements. What happened today?
Well, I had to quickly move out of the way because I saw the jurors walking straight through right where I am. And of course, they cannot hear anything that's going on about the trial other than what they hear in the courtroom. So I had to be very careful not to be near where the jurors were at. As you said, the jury was picked yesterday. It is majority female presenting. We had opening statements yesterday, which were incredible. Deputy District Attorney Robert Wayner made the statement that while humans tend to have compassion towards other humans, DXE and Wayne want to extend that compassion to all living beings. And we all were like, yeah, yes, we do. And then we did have the first witness, Mr. Weber, called to the stand, and then into today was the same thing. So all this morning has been testimony by Mr. Weber, and the last half an hour was spent watching a live stream from the event itself. So that's what's happened so far this morning.
So, wow, very good summary. Thank you for that. Carla Cabral reporting live from the courthouse. Mr. Weber is one of the owners of one of the farms, the factory farms involved in this case, where it was years ago, 2018, 2019, that a lot of activists went into two farms and took out, it was originally 3 farms. 1 farm was thrown out, but they took out approximately 70 birds, and it was a wild, wild scene. I'm going to play Direct Action Everywhere's video that shows these open rescues in action. And then we're going to talk to the person who put that together, Donny Moss of TheirTurn.net. But this will give you a really good idea of what this case is all about. It's called Open Rescue, the right to rescue animals in distress inside factory farms.
We entered the facility and we immediately came to the front and chained ourselves to the front gate. Another team chained themselves to the slaughter line, which was actually turned on while one of the activists was chained onto the line. They didn't seem to care that he almost got killed from that.
This little baby was found in one of the barns, already dead.
The animal cruelty that is going on here is horrific. These animals are hatched on site, and then this building behind me is the slaughterhouse. And inside of this facility, there's massive amounts of barns, and they're mesh floors. And so their webbed feet press down into the mesh and cuts into their feet. These animals are meant to live in the water, and they never touch the water their entire lives. Never.
So we're going to go straight out to Donny Moss. You put that video together. You were there. You were at one of the events that it's the heart of this case. What was it like, and what's your take on this trial?
So at the time that I participated in this mass action at this particular duck farm, I mean, I don't think any of us were thinking about sort of except for the people who were actually putting themselves in harm's way with the law. The rest of us weren't thinking about the fact that this was going to be a high profile case 5 years later or whatever it is. And so here's what happened that day. There were teams of people who went into that duck farm before the vast majority of us showed up on buses. And they took the dead ducks who you saw, the activists, who were chained together at the gate, and they were blocking the gate and holding those ducks. They found those ducks just on the premises, in garbage cans, I think, probably amongst other ducks. And then there was another team that attached themselves to the conveyor, to the slaughter line. And then I think that there was yet another team that rescued some ducks who were alive but sick. And you could, the video that you're showing there is the vast majority of us were outside the gates, not engaging in the civil disobedience that you could see the people at the gates participating in. And then all of a sudden, this what looked like an army of police officers came in their riot gear, and I don't know if they were there to intimidate us, but it didn't work. And the civil disobedience continued until all of the people who you see there were arrested. I happen to have been standing right on the left side of the gate, where you can see a man in a light blue shirt, maybe holding a camera right now. And I was standing next to Wayne at the moment where he was arrested. And I remember thinking to myself, he's not doing anything. He's not inside. He's not chained. He's on public property. Why is he being arrested? Well, now, Jane, we know why, because they wanted to cut off the snake's head. Is that what the phrase is? Because they perceived him as to be an organizer of these events. And in fact, he's been charged with conspiracy to trespass. And so it was really powerful, I would say, being there amongst all of these activists and amongst all of these brave souls who were engaging in civil disobedience to shine a light on the atrocities taking place inside. So I had my camera and I threw together that footage that you saw today to document what was happening from the perspective of those.
Absolutely awesome footage. Once again, if you're just joining us, we are doing live coverage of the trial of Wayne Hsiung, who is a co-founder of Direct Action Everywhere and the leader of the movement. Carla, do you have something? She just jumped away, probably because there are jurors going in and out. I mean, we're in a very small town area in Sonoma County, California, very rural. And it's so interesting that this prosecution, some call it a persecution, is happening in a so-called progressive blue state. But being here in LA, I know when you get out, I reported on a trial, actually it was a Michael Jackson trial from Santa Maria, California. It's a totally different world from Los Angeles, Venice, California, and Hollywood. And so this is what's happening here. I want to talk a little bit about the big ruling, which is that the defense cannot show any video of the animal cruelty. Okay, so Nathan Semmel, you're a former Manhattan district attorney. You've studied this case. The judge ruled that not only are there no cameras in the courtroom, no video, no stills, the sketch artist can't even sketch anybody in the courtroom. So what's she doing there? And now they're saying no footage of animal cruelty at all will be shown. And the judge was quoted as saying, if anybody even mentions animal cruelty, I'm going to declare a mistrial. What on earth is going on here?
Well, it sure seems like the deck is stacked, but what we've seen from past trials is I think the judge and the DA are probably doing the defense a favor. This tactic has not worked. Jurors don't like being kept in the dark, and it will be apparent. I think obviously through testimony of Wayne, he's made it clear to everybody historically, and I think in this case that he plans to testify and put forth a rigorous defense. That there's a reason why they went in there. And the only reason you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, are not going to see it is because the prosecution won't let us see it. We operate, transparently. The video that you've seen the prosecution present, we took that video. We are proud of that video. We want the world to see why we're doing what we're doing. And it's the prosecution that's trying to keep you in the dark. So, it's not surprising. We've seen this before. I think it's a mistake by the prosecution. And, when your opponents make a mistake, let them.
Well, a very positive interpretation of what's happening. But I got to go out to Carla because the owner of one of the farms, the factory farms, I don't call them regular farms. I mean, the owner of one of the farms in question actually testified for the prosecution that let's just spell it out. One factory farm produces up to 500,000 eggs per day using about 500,000 birds. And Carla, my understanding from tweets about the trial, if we could have cameras in the courtroom, we wouldn't have to get it from third parties. We could actually show you what is happening in the courtroom, but we can't do that because they have not only gagged the defense, but they have banned video, still photos, and even sketches from inside the courtroom. So we're going to rely on you, Carla. The video that they're playing is actually video shot by Direct Action Everywhere. But one thing it doesn't contain is the video of why they went in there, the distress, sick, suffering, and dying animals. Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really interesting. The video that they chose to play, and again, it was like a half an hour of video, showed all of the activists very peaceful, always talking about making sure that we were there with compassion in our hearts, carrying white flowers. I understand having that many people come onto your property can be daunting, but we made it very clear why we were there. Over and over and over again, Wayne mentioned that we were there because under 597E, the California Penal Code 597E, and according to legal scholars, we had every right to be there. And that was made clear in that video. The jury is really paying attention. They're seeing how everything is playing out. And I think that that's going to go a long way towards understanding the intent and the reason that we were all there over and over. Julianne Perry is the investigator who is taking the live stream, and she's making it very clear that investigations have been done, that there is criminal animal cruelty evidence, that evidence had been presented to law enforcement who did nothing. So all of these things that we had wanted to introduce, but were told that we were not going to be able to, the prosecution is playing for everybody to see and hear. And I think that this could be a way of opening the door to our getting more evidence of that very cruelty in so the jury can see it.
It's so fascinating. And I think you've got to wonder if the jurors are saying, what is it that they're not showing to me? I want to play something that Wayne Hsiung, the defendant, the final defendant, there were a lot of defendants and they got narrowed down to just one person. Here's what he has to say about the cruelty being edited out.
What's in this envelope is like an episode of Black Mirror that's come to life. This is a USB drive with video footage that has been edited by the prosecution, which is trying to put me in jail for giving aid to sick and dying animals who are on the slaughter line moments from potentially being sent into a boiling hot water tank where they'd drown in scalding hot water. But what's interesting about the video footage is they've edited out all the animal cruelty. All you see is activists going into the slaughterhouse, in some cases doing some pretty dramatic things like locking their necks to the slaughter line. One of them is nearly killed when the slaughterhouse workers turn the slaughter line back on when the activists' necks are on the slaughter line. But what's been edited out at every point in this video footage is the animals being hurt, knives dripping with blood, animals flailing on the slaughter line in a desperate effort to be free. The screen literally goes black. And when I watched this, I just thought to myself, this is like an episode of Black Mirror. That's a basic free speech issue. That's a very basic constitutional issue, that the government's allowed to literally edit out things they don't want the jury to see. And that's creepy, you know? The idea that the government can just edit out the things they don't want in the world. Let's hope the jury sees the truth.
Wow. Well, let's play jurors here. We've got several people who are California residents, also animal activists, but Michelle Celestino, you've come at this from a health standpoint, and you haven't until recently even known much about animal activism. When you see that as a juror, what would your reaction be, honestly?
I would be horrified, and I would question whether or not the government is really telling us what we need to know. Elmira Tanner, she had brought up that at the beginning of jury proceedings, DXC put a huge display of the animals dying out in front because, you know, we can't show that. They can't show any animal cruelty. And that the judge saw that and got really angry. She immediately went back into court, and then she took a toll of all the jurors that were affected by that felt sympathy or in any way were moved, and she removed them. Now, isn't that the crux of the case? That's the whole thing. I just, there's so many different back and forths here. And I think their civil rights, the defense of civil rights is being put into jeopardy. I mean, it's ludicrous.
I have to, well, let's get to the other panelists' response. And then I want to go back to Carla and ask about the prosecution complaining that there were DXC supporters in the hallway. But let me get your reaction first. Ellen Dent of Animal Alliance Network.
I just, I agree with Nathan that this whole, just limiting what the jury can see is going to backfire. They're going to wonder what they're not seeing, and how are they supposed to come to a decision without all of the evidence? So it doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm not sure what DXE has in mind as far as, any sort of demonstrations out in the front. It'll probably just upset the judge more, but maybe that will help open up more eyes. And I hope that everybody's sharing this coverage too, because the public deserves to know the truth. They deserve to see exactly why they were there. And I wonder how the jury will take, just the human cruelty of it all, the way that they were being treated by the police, the way that the slaughterhouse workers turned on the line while they were still connected to it. Will that have any sort of, influence on their decision?
Well, I'm not sure that they saw that part, but we're going to get clarification. But Lindsey Baker of the Action Hour, what's your take on all of this so far?
Well, I have to agree what everyone is saying about when you take information away from people, their imagination will explode with even more color and more drama, because that's how humans are. But my question is, will Wayne be able to describe the situation? Will be able to say words like flailing on the floor and you can see blood dripping? Can they use those sort of graphic words when they're talking to the jury? Because it seems like that's the only way that the jury would be able to have any picture of what is going on.
Well, that's an excellent question. We're going to go straight out to our reporter on the scene, Carla Cabral. You're at the courthouse. You've been watching the trial. What's your understanding of how far they can go in describing? Obviously, there are animals. It's a factory farm. In fact, there's 500,000 animals at one factory farm, which to me is the heart of the problem. Okay, you stick 500,000 people in a couple of large warehouse facilities and imagine what would happen. All right, these are sentient beings. My personal belief is 500,000 animals shouldn't be packed into one factory, obviously. But where are the boundaries as far as what Wayne, the defendant who is defending himself, can say in court about the condition of the animals?
Well, so yeah, the judge has made it clear that she is okay with witnesses stating what they saw as long as they don't expound on the cruelty aspect of things. And it was interesting during the opening statements, Wayne was able to talk about animal cruelty, and he used words like flailing on their backs and chickens stuck in the wires, barely alive. And the judge actually stopped him twice, interrupted Wayne in his opening statements twice to have sidebars, and then came back and then interrupted again for a break. So the prosecution was never interrupted, but when Wayne was trying to talk about animal cruelty, even though the prosecution did not object, the judge interjected and had those two sidebars. So I felt that was telling in and of itself, but he was able to continue and he was able to talk about it, although I do not think during testimony that will be tolerated. I do believe that witnesses will be cut off, if not by the prosecution, by this judge.
By the way, we invite any of the owners of these 2 factory farms or anybody from the animal agriculture industry or the prosecution on anytime. We would love to actually show the owner of this farm talking in his own defense when he was being interviewed on direct by the prosecutors. But because we can't get any cameras in the courtroom, we can't show his side. And that's the irony of it. Like, we're a news organization. We would show the owner of the farm talking in his own defense, but we can't do that because we have no cameras in the courtroom, and we can't even take a still photo. We can't even do a sketch of him. Okay, so there's a double-edged sword to the suppression of information because the judge has not only issued a gag order on the defendant, but has banned any video or still images from the trial. And even the sketch artist, I have to bring this up again because it's just so cray, as they say. Here she is, the sketch artist. The judge ripped a sketch out of her hands and then issued a ruling. It said, sure, you can sketch, but you can't sketch the prosecutor, the witnesses, the judge, the court staff, the jurors, the bailiffs, or the observers in the gallery. I have never in my entire life covering criminal trials for decades ever heard of something like this in the United States of America. You gotta wonder what's going on. And by the way, I also invite the judge, Laura Passaglia, on anytime. And she, by the way, is a former prosecutor, I believe in the very same county where the prosecution is prosecuting Wayne. So she may very well know the prosecutors on a social basis. I don't know. They're all invited on. But let me just give you an example of one photo. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is a photo provided by Direct Action Everywhere of their undercover investigation. They say, and they have an entire media press packet that they have given out to all media. We'd like to see more mainstream media coverage of this issue. But this is just an example of what they would like to show the jury and are not able to show. Again, we invite anybody connected to the animal agriculture industry or the farm owners on the factory farm owners own. So we got to go back to our former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney, current kick-ass defense attorney, Nathan Semmel. Bring us your thoughts on what's going on in the jury's head right this second, given everything you've heard.
Well, I mean, it's hard to predict jurors what they're thinking. I mean, I think anybody evaluating evidence in a criminal trial wants to be equipped with as much information as possible. You know, there was discussion earlier about the judge saying that if the prosecution opens the door, then some evidence of animal cruelty might come in. I've been following a little bit on the Twitter feed, and it sounds like the prosecution, through its witness, the factory farm owner, has essentially testified to there being normal conditions, and that, you know, the chickens live a normal life, and like anywhere else, occasionally there's death. I mean, to me, this opens the door, right, to reality. I mean, this should allow the defense to be able to show that this is anything but normal. You know, babies don't just drop dead every single day in normal life. It just, you know, it doesn't work that way. These conditions are horrific. You showed that image. And beyond just the cruelty, the video serves another purpose that I think, at least in a criminal case, is equally important, if not more, is it shows the credibility of the defense witnesses. It's one thing for a defendant who has their liberty, you know, at stake to say something. You know, often it's taken with a grain of salt by jurors, because they know that person has an interest in the outcome of the case and has a reason to be less than truthful. But when there's video that corroborates exactly what the person is saying, it's powerful. It shows they're telling the truth. It shows they're being transparent, and they have nothing to hide, and it's why they're not guilty. So the fact that the jury is that evidence is being kept from them is, I think, unfair. And I continue to say, I do think it's going to come back to bite the prosecution, that I think they're going to regret not just putting it all out there and saying to the jury, listen, what goes on in these factory farms is often horrific. And we understand why these activists are doing what they're doing, but it's still a violation of law. Make that argument if you're the prosecution, but be transparent. Stop hiding all the evidence, and then let the jury make a decision. And I suspect no juror would ever convict somebody if they got to see those videos.
Well, the other thing, Carla, is that, you know, Wayne could spend up to 2 years in prison. This is not some misdemeanor case. There's felonies involved. Explain that, and explain how the prosecution was conducting the interview of the factory farm owner, who essentially said, it's great conditions for my animals, but yes, they die all the time. Is that a correct characterization or not?
Yeah, so first of all, they have been hammering home trespass. There are 2 charges of misdemeanor trespass and 2 charges of conspiracy to trespass. So the prosecution has been asking Mr. Weber, the co-owner of Sunrise Egg Farm, did you give permission for anyone to be on your property? Is this your property? Is that your property? Because activists were not just on the farm on the side where the barns were, but they were also on, as you see what's being shown here, many of the activists were across the street, and they made it clear that that is also property owned by the Weber family. So
well,
no matter where
I got to jump in for a second and say there were 2 actions, and I believe this is another one of the farms, but they all pretty much look the same. Hundreds of people from Direct Action Everywhere show up, and then the police show up in droves. And, you know, I just want to point out we're in a culture where there are very serious crimes being committed. In other words, people being, you know, gunned down with assault rifles, etc. And it does reflect on the priorities of our law enforcement system, that this is the kind of turnout that they produce when people are going into a factory farm to rescue animals. But where are these people with all the other societal problems that we have? You can pick your own, but, you know, violence in general in our society, I'd like to see more cops on my block. Let's put it that way. Go ahead.
Yeah, and you know, Mr. Weber made it very clear that people had not been invited onto his property, and the prosecution was trying very hard to make it sound like a Sunrise Egg Farm is just this tiny family-run farm. The barns in the front were built by, you know, Mr. Weber's grandfather and father, and that compared to other farms around the nation, that even with over 500,000 chickens. This is just a tiny family farm, and the conditions are up to the highest standards possible, animal welfare standards. They've been stamped humane and organic.
I gotta ask, if they're saying that, doesn't that open the door? I mean, my gosh, if they're saying it's humane and the highest standards, I mean, I can't understand how in a legal proceeding, if somebody makes a claim that's at the heart of the case, that there's no opportunity to respond to that. I got to go back to Nathan, and then we'll get around Robin.
Yeah, I mean, that is opening the door 101. If that's what the testimony has been, then of course the defense should have the opportunity to rebut it. And I'll tell you one thing, it is a home run for the defense when the prosecution hides evidence and then tries to paint a different picture than the evidence shows, and then the jury is allowed to see it because it rebuts the evidence. That's gold, and I'm hoping that happens. I suspect that Wayne will be making that argument, if he hasn't already, that the prosecution continues to open the door to the animal cruelty evidence.
Yes, and we've been getting a lot of comments. Dominion wants to know if Unchained TV app is available on Samsung. Yes, it is. It's on the TV right behind me. And send me that a sanctuary short for sure. We'll take video where we can get it, as a nonprofit that's trying to get the word out, because the mainstream media is not covering these cases. I mean, we should have CBS, NBC, I'm talking national, CNN, Fox News, PBS, everybody out there. But we can get more information. I can tell you that there aren't a massive cameras anywhere I see. And there hasn't been as much coverage. There's been some really good independent coverage by like Sentient Media and other independent organizations, but the mainstream media not giving this their due. Ellen Dent, what do you make of how this is being conducted big picture? I mean, we can look back at criminal trials in history and go, oh my gosh, what a travesty of justice. But this is happening in real time today, Ellen.
I just wonder how this can be considered a fair trial when they're not allowed to talk about why they entered that property in the first place, and what they saw, what they actually observed as witnesses, and really, explain the suffering that they saw on these farms. So it doesn't make any sense to me that they're able to, paint this picture of, this really humane conditions and small family farm, when that's just absolutely not the case. And it's not true. Like it's for a fact, this is a factory farm, and it is atrocious. It is an absolute nightmare behind those walls without windows that they do not want the public to see. And the public deserves to see that. So keep sharing, everybody, please.
Yes. And, we invite anybody from those farms on. Dr. Silas Rao, who is a brilliant systems engineer, founder of Climate Healer, says we're all being factory farmed, that even the factory owners are trapped in a system not of their own making, and that we must have compassion for all the individuals involved because it's societal condition, and what we need is systemic change. Lindsey Baker.
Absolutely. It's easier said than done, but it seems futile. I mean, the mere fact, if I was on the jury and I was told, that this is the most wonderful, well-kept family farm, generations, but you can't see it. I mean, that's just insulting my intelligence. But the main thing is, this is going to explode in their face. It's just a matter of time. But what to address what you said, I think we have to have compassion. We have to help these people, show them that we're willing to work with them to finding a path out, like becoming a mushroom producer or some other form of commerce that could replace the farms, because we know people have to have jobs and make a living. So I think that, we're right at the beginning where it's being exposed. The ugly, the reference, pimple has to be popped. And then we could start healing. We could start making things change for everyone to a more sustainable future.
Now, right now, well said, we're in the prosecution's case, but ultimately, then Wayne Hsiung, who is defending himself, a former constitutional law professor, he's the one person on trial and the co-founder of Direct Action Everywhere and considered a major leader in the animal rights movement. He's going to be able to cross-examine the prosecution witnesses. And then ultimately, the defense can present its case, and they're going to have Dr. Rosenberg on. Let's listen to her.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kirsten Rosenberg, and I was just admitted to testify as an expert witness.
But she can only speak about the footage from Sunrise Farms and Reichart that she reviewed to render her veterinary opinions. She cannot speak about the medical record for Libby, a hen rescued from Sunrise and brought to her for care who was so sick she died within hours.
Now, Donny Moss, what do you make of that? Like, why is it that she can talk about some things, but then this one chicken, this one hen, ixnay?
I mean, it seems to be part of the pattern of minimizing the amount of cruelty that the jury is exposed to. I can't help but think that the prosecution team knows that withholding all of this documentation in previous right to rescue trials backfired. And is it possible that the footage here, the footage of the cruelty is so egregious that the prosecution and the judge would rather take a risk of the same risk again than allowing the jury to see this footage because it would almost be a slam dunk for the defense? I wonder if that's what's going on here, because surely they've done their research about other cases. You know, I thought it was interesting that the judge interrupted Wayne twice during his opening arguments to censor him. And the jury is obviously right there. I mean, that's who the opening arguments are delivered to. They must be wondering, saying, let the man speak. What does he want to say? What is she preventing him from telling us? So maybe the prosecution is damned if they do and damned if they don't. That's my hope anyway.
You know, you make a very good point. Wayne has been involved in other trials where he's defended people like Alexandra Paul, the former Baywatch actress who was involved in open rescue, also in the Northern California area. She was acquitted, even though it's caught on tape exactly what she did. Here's her and her co-defendant, Alicia Santurio, taking chickens off a truck destined for a slaughterhouse. And they were prosecuted, and the jury said, you're innocent. You're not guilty. We refuse to send you to jail. And so that couldn't be more clear that they were taking these animals. The question is, were they rescuing them as they believe, or were they stealing them? The jury decided it's a rescue because they refused to convict them. And so that was a huge victory. Then in another case, you had Wayne.
So Circle 4 is a farm that processes and kills 1.2 million pigs every year.
We're about to head into Circle 4. This is the heart of evil. You can already hear the screams of the mother pigs inside. They're cramped, they're suffering, and we're going to try and expose what's actually happening inside. You guys ready to go? Mm-hmm. Let's put our lights on.
I mean, in that case, Wayne was acquitted, even though caught on tape. This is an upside down world, Carla, where usually the prosecution is thrilled when you have, very rarely does it happen that you catch a crime in progress and they want to play it. Let's say there's a carjacking or there's some other, of course, if you have the suspect doing the carjacking on tape, you want to play that. But in this upside down world, in all these cases, they try to keep the footage of the actual crime out because it shows why they are actually doing this alleged crime to rescue these suffering animals. And then the jury sees, figures it out somehow and acquits. So that is a pattern, but our understanding or our thought process was that these prosecutors had learned from the last two acquittals and were doing it differently. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they have learned. I think that's why they have chosen the charges that they have. They dropped the burglary, they dropped the theft. They're clearly not actually concerned about the welfare of the chickens. That's why they just chose the trespass, and they wanted to tack a felony charge on conspiracy to trespass. I just had to move because I saw Arnie Reedley, another co-owner of Sunrise Farms. He smiled at me, obviously doesn't know who I am, but I didn't want us to be talking, so I moved away from there. I'm guessing then that he is going to be the next witness called up. But back to the charges, I think definitely they've chosen the charges on purpose. And also, it's very interesting because in this case, the judge ruled that any of the evidence after the fact, so all of the medical records that show that these chickens and these ducks, that they did have the diseases that they were thought to have possibly had when Dr. Rosenberg looked at footage, when we have gone in to investigate and we've seen symptoms, there have been necropsies done that have confirmed what everybody thought was going on, and that was ruled inadmissible by this judge. I'd like to know what you guys think of that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that, Carla. Live at the scene, doing a bang-up job as usual. It's very difficult to report live from a courthouse. I can tell you, I've been there, and you have to make sure the jurors don't hear you. By the way, we had a comment, invite the farmers, the factory farmers on. Absolutely. Anybody involved in this case, including the owners of the facilities, the prosecution, the judge, and anyone else, including Wayne Hsiung. But he can't talk because he's gagged. He can't talk to the media. In fact, the last time we were live, the prosecution is watching our coverage. And hello, prosecutors, you're also invited on. And then they went back into court and complained because we go live when we're at the scene on phones, so you can't tell that it's media. Anybody with a cell phone is hypothetically media in today's world. That's why gag orders are so bizarre. And somebody was holding, Carla was holding, or one of her other DXE members was holding a phone and got Wayne talking. And the prosecution went into the court and complained and said he was violating the gag order, which is, I mean, that's a crazy upside down world. And prosecutors, if you're watching, don't learn too much from this live interview because it seems like the prosecution is watching this. And it seems like the prosecution and the judge are operating almost toward the same goal. Judges are supposed to be impartial. They're not supposed to side with one side or the other, but we all know that Lady Justice is not blind, and maybe she doesn't even have bad vision. So Michelle wants to know, I thought he was ungagged after jury selection. I don't think so. Is he? Can he now talk? No, right? No.
No, I actually, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I had asked our other guest, Murray Holden, who got admonished as well for speaking with us on the panel after she spoke. I went to her today and asked, okay, the jury has been selected. Is the gag order lifted? Could Wayne come on and speak with us? And she said no. So far, the judge has not lifted the gag order. And just to be safe, I could not ask Wayne to be on with us today.
You are right. That's the one they complained about, a woman who was on the defense team. Yes, absolutely. Okay, Michelle Celestino, you've been listening to all this. I think if anybody is your average juror, you might play that role. You're not running any animal activist organization. You profile plant-based restaurants on Unchained TV, but you wouldn't really consider yourself a hardcore animal activist out there. I don't think you've ever even attended a protest. What is your take on where the jury is right now, taking all this in?
I think as a juror, I would be questioning the information I'm getting, because clearly they're trying to paint the defense as, well, they're already showing that the owner of the animal agriculture, the farm, is like this well-mannered man who is taking care of the chickens and the ducks and everything's okay. But in actuality, I would feel like something's very weird, because why would you be hiding the information? Why would you stop Wayne in the middle of him speaking about the animal cruelty? I would be questioning everything. And then I also wanted to bring up Dr. Rosenberg. During witness screening, the prosecution screened her and cross-examined her as well. So there's that undue favoritism, again, going to the prosecution, which is ridiculous. I don't know what to say, Jane. I don't think it's fair what's going on right now.
I have to say, you're raising a really important point, is that it happened a couple of days ago, so we've kind of moved on. But I mean, it is another crazy thing that I personally have never seen. And Nathan, I've got to ask you about this. The judge demanded that the defense fly in their witnesses from all over, and then a lot of them had to, or some of them had to appear in court after flying in and testify, and the prosecution got to cross-examine them. But correct me if I'm wrong, Carla, the prosecution witnesses were not required to show up in the same way and be cross-examined by the defense, right? Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. They did not have to produce anybody.
I've never heard of such a thing. This is really bizarre. Take it away, Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing this for a long time. I've been on both sides. I've never seen it before. What does happen in cases where the defense to the case is essentially an admission of the crime with explanation, which is what this is. So you might have a situation where, in a self-defense case, you're admitting that that your client used a degree of force, but there's an explanation for it. In those situations like this, it's not unusual for the defense to have to do what's called proffer the evidence that they plan to put forward to see if it actually establishes a real defense, that there is a justification. So that part I don't have a problem with. What is normally done, and what I've seen every single time, is the attorneys, in this case, Wayne's representing himself, but he essentially says, if called to testify, defense witness A is going to say XYZ. And then the prosecution says, well, that shouldn't be admissible. It's not relevant, or it doesn't satisfy the particular defense. And then the judge rules. I have never seen the witnesses have to come 100 yards, let alone, thousands of miles to come in and give the prosecution a free look at the evidence and cross-examine them. It's unnecessary, it's unfair, and honestly, it's unheard of.
Now, could this all be grounds for appeal? Just a quick answer on that. Let's say he is convicted.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't necessarily, it's certainly grounds for appeal. Does it mean it would be a reversal? I can't say that, but there's the accumulation of all of this that we've been talking about today. It's hard to imagine that there would not be a reversal with the information that's being kept from the jury, despite the door being opened, the defenses that have not been permitted, including necessity, and so many other things. It's hard to imagine that an appeals court would allow this. And on the gag order, Jane, this is absurd. It should never have been issued in the first place. There are other measures that can be taken to protect jurors from being influenced by media that have been done countless times. It's done all the time in very high profile mainstream media cases in which there's no gag order. Right now,
there's a very famous case right now.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no gag order.
There was a tiny limited gag order. Don't say anything about the court personnel. But I want to ask about the jury makeup, because Michelle Celestino had made the point that she thought it was interesting that, for example, Cassie King, who is white, charges were dropped against her at the 11th hour right before trial. And now we have Wayne Hsiung, a person of color, who is the sole remaining defendant. So what is the jury makeup that you can see? Obviously, you can't determine that just by looking at people, but you can get a sense how many male, how many female, overall ages, that sort of thing.
Well, obviously, I can't speak to how they identify, but there are eight female presenting jurors and 4 male presenting jurors, and there are 3 alternates, 2 female, 1 male. I did think it was very interesting that during the jury selection process, the prosecution used peremptory strikes to get rid of 3 African-American women. And I know that Wayne, Nathan, maybe you can help out with this. Wayne, I was not in for the day that Wayne tried to argue something to say that was unfair, that they got rid of 3 African-American women.
Is it in your mind, again, we can't, it's up to people to identify themselves, is my belief, but is it your opinion that it's a primarily white jury?
Yes, I'm trying to think, there is only 1 African-American female, and there are a few that are not white presenting that I can tell, but it is mostly a white jury, yes.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for that update, Carla Cabral. As we go back to our panel, you had made the point, Michelle, so maybe you can make it again and we can do a round robin in terms of what you think is going on behind the scenes there.
Well, I think it's really important to point that out, that Cassie, all her charges were dropped, like immediately, right before the trial started. And the first thing that came to my mind was because she's white. The jury demographic up there is primarily white. And something struck me when you were playing the video of the farms and the protesters that were peacefully sitting down, and then all the policemen that came out. Like, it reminded me of January 6th, the insurrection, right? It almost seems like there are more policemen there than there were at the Capitol. And these are peaceful protesters. And I feel like to take away Cassie, it would be easier with a defendant that is a person of color to paint this picture of him being, quote, an insurrectionist or a terrorist. And I think I even read in the tweet that of the coverage that they were kind of painting, DXC and all the activists as that, which makes it easier if the face of that is not, a white person of Catholic background that matches whatever demographic that is up there. And it's easier for them to be like, okay, in the mind psychologically of the jurors to relate to that. So if Cassie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and I just, to your point, Cassie King had written an article that was publicized where she talked about her Catholic girl upbringing, essentially painting herself as, and this was her description, a good Catholic girl who cares about moral issues. Let's do a round robin on this. Ellen Dent, what are your thoughts?
It just sounds like more unfairness. It sounds like he is not being judged by a jury of his peers, which is what is supposed to happen when they do jury selection. It just seems very heavily biased towards the prosecution. And but hopefully, these juries, just like juries in the past with these cases with DXC, will be able to discern for themselves what's happening, how he's being gagged. Hopefully he can tell them that he's being gagged and that he's being forced to omit information that would help them come to a judgment.
And, one thing that I want to say is Wayne is a former constitutional law professor. She is defending himself. Normally, they say if you have yourself for a client, you've got a fool for a client, because people are often strongly advised not to defend themselves. But in this case, I feel that that may be his secret weapon. Let's hear him and get a sense of his style in the courtroom. Here was it's just a little snippet of his closing argument in the Utah trial, where he had taken the pigs out with a co-defendant and was ultimately acquitted.
And
I wish I could tell you the full story of what happened. We were on very direct orders to talk only about, the night of March 7th, 2017, only about 2 pickets. But it's an interesting thing hearing someone as compelling as Juan, and he's a very compelling speaker, talk about what's in your heart in a way that you know is not true, and it's not. And honestly, the best way to explain it is the way Victor explained it, that there's a big difference between stealing an animal and trying to help someone who needs some help. And I think at the end of this closing argument, we'll be convinced, hopefully, that that's all that we're trying to do. But I did want to go back to where we started. In our opening statement, or I should say my opening statement, not our opening statement, that we talked about how there were no piglets taken from gestation farm. And we don't have to worry about that. Count 1 is covered. We're not talking about gestation buildings. The prosecution's conceded, and the judge ruled that we don't have to do that charge. But these 2 pieces are still very important. And the first piece is that we didn't have any purpose to take anything of value from Swift. We were there to document conditions and save lives.
Wow. So I would like to get your thoughts, Donny Moss, on his ability as an attorney. I mean, if they're trying to paint him as some kind of radical thug, sorry, he's more like a bookworm who reads, the Encyclopedia Britannica every day.
His presentation style is so disarming, and he's so compelling, and he speaks so simply and beautifully that, it would be hard to be in that jury seat and not really want to take him seriously. One of the things I was thinking is, if I'm a juror in the current case, and the charges are trespass, I might be wondering myself, what's really happening here? People trespass all the time. Yet this seems to be about much more than a simple trespass case. You've got all these people outside. You've got all of this attempt to silence what clearly needs to be shared. What's really going on here? I wonder if that's what's going on in the jurors' minds right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, the news is filled with reports of giant big box stores closing down because of crime waves. And, this is a trespass. And we know that, now law enforcement often doesn't even prosecute unless the value is of a certain value. All right. You steal a $40,000 bag. Yeah, you might get prosecuted. But if you steal like something worth $50, $60, not so much in today's world, which has become a real issue that people and big corporations have been discussing. It's in the news today. And yet this really intense prosecution of this man for trespass and conspiracy to trespass. And again, you said, Donny, in at least one of the 2 factory farms in question, he didn't go in, he was outside. I just want to clarify that.
So at the duck farm, and that's the farm where we're seeing the riot police, at that duck farm, I don't believe that he entered the farm that day. And at the moment you can actually see him in the white shirt off to the left and the tie. Someone's walking toward him. Now he just turned his back to us. That is where he was when he was arrested, because I was standing next to him at that moment, wondering to myself, why is he being arrested? And what about all these other people who were actually blocking the entrance and the people who ran inside? So, yeah, something was very odd about that moment to me. But now we know they were going after who they perceived to be the leader of this whole action. But he wasn't inside. Yeah.
Okay. So he wasn't inside, yet he's charged with trespass. Now, I don't know about the other factory farm, but Carla, you have been quoted as saying that someone had overheard a member of the prosecution team. I certainly didn't, because I'm not there, but saying we want to cut the head off the snake. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very clear that that is what they want to do by their very actions. I have to think that the jury is also wondering, when they see 500 people at this action, when they see all of these activists who are going onto the farms in their Tyvek suits and going in and looking at all of the conditions on these factory farms, I would wonder, well, why is just this one person sitting here? And in fact, Priya Sauhani was sitting right next to me, one of the other former defendants in this case, and they're showing video of Priya on the screen, and here she is sitting right next to me. I have to think that the jury is wondering what is going on. Why is this one person the only one sitting here with charges of trespass when clearly so many other people went onto the farm? I don't know. I think that to me, it's very clear. And yes, there is definitely evidence. I feel I can say that confidently, that we know we have evidence that the other side, the prosecution, is saying that they want to cut the head off the snake. So this is clearly a witch hunt to go after Wayne, which he's not even part of DXE anymore. So I'm not sure what the end game is with all of this. And another point that was rattled in my head, thank you for mentioning earlier, was that when Mike Weber was on the stand, he actually used the word insurrection. And I think that that was on purpose. He called what was happening on his farm an insurrection.
And didn't he say, or clarify, did he say that he had no idea why this was happening? In other words, he didn't say, oh yeah, these people are coming over. I know they're activists. They're trying to get in my farm to take some of the animals out. What did he say regarding what his thought process was?
Well, yeah, certainly. He said he was frightened. He had no idea what was going on. He saw hundreds of people. He didn't know what their intentions were. And, you know, in true Wayne fashion, when Wayne walked up and met him, they shook hands. Wayne tried to explain what was going on. And when they moved away from Mr. Weber, Wayne made it very clear that we all had compassion and sympathy, that we understood that he might not understand what was going on, but there was a larger issue at hand, the issue of the suffering of the animals on these factory farms.
So would it be fair to say, and again, we invite this man on, my personal belief is, you know, the people who run these institutions, these factory farms, are also being factory farmed. They're part of a system. I think those in our movement have said that, you know, it's not against any person, it's against a system that encourages, let's say, one factory farm to have 500,000 chickens. But do you get a sense that the prosecution, Lindsey, is trying to paint the owners of these facilities as the victims in this case, which it seems like that's what they're, I don't know. What do you think?
I think they're trying to protect a system that is so threatened. And that's why you'll see a case like this when you're saying, with all the violence on the streets, why is there so much attention by law enforcement, by the courts, by the prosecutors to convict this? Because it's threatening the fiber of an institution. And in a sense, they are victims, because they have to transform. They will have to transform everything, every way they think, everything they do, every way they do business. So it is, and I guess the argument from the other side could be, this is our food system, but that's a flawed argument, because we know we can feed more people with a plant-based diet globally than we are, and we can save the planet. So, you know, in a sense, Jane, I have to say this, but I'm totally sympathetic with Wayne, but they are victims. They're victims of the same system that we are being factory farmed from.
Yes. Nobody, I think, has expressed any kind of vitriol toward the individuals who run these facilities. And that's kind of the philosophy, isn't it, Carla, of Direct Action Everywhere?
Absolutely. I cannot state that. I can't say more that we have no ill will at all toward Mike Weber or any of the people who are running these places. We want them to learn and to grow. We want to work with them to move towards a better future. There is no hate in us for anybody when we go to these places. We're just there for the animals. I think we all care about the animals. It's just coming to an understanding that if we're going to move forward, if we're going to have a planet, if we're going to exist here, we have to exist peacefully together. And what happens on these factory farms is just, it's not okay, but it's going to take all of us working together peacefully, talking, sitting down, and finding a better way forward. We have no ill will, none.
Well, we've had a really good, I think, overview of what's happening in court. Now, court isn't going to happen tomorrow, or is it? I mean, today's Friday. When are we starting up again? Maybe you could give us the schedule, and then we'll get final thoughts from everybody as to where this is going.
Yeah, so the judge said that there will be court Tuesday through Friday, starting at 10:30 in the morning until noon, break for lunch from noon to 1:30, and then court again from 1:30 to 4:30. No court on Monday. Court will be Tuesday through Friday.
So what's your prediction of how long this is going to take?
Personally, I think that it was going to be over in less than 2 weeks. So I think we're going to be done in less than 2 weeks.
All right. Well, let's start with you, Carla. What are your final thoughts as you stand there outside the courthouse in Sonoma County, California? And people have to remember, California is a very big agricultural state. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, in terms of, for example, dairy. But take it away.
My final thoughts are that I feel good about this jury. They're very attentive. They seem like they're really paying attention to everything that's being said on both sides. I had to come all the way out here because Mr. Weber just walked past. The jurors are now coming in. But I think that we are going to be surprised. I have a good feeling about this. And I want to thank you, Jane, and all of Unchained TV for being the only news source that is covering this important trial. I hope that everybody follows at Sonoma Trial on Twitter. And I just thank everybody so much that's on the panel.
Thank you. And you can help by sharing this out. If you're watching on the streaming network, you can share it out by texting it. Literally, you can text this to somebody. And if you're watching on Facebook, you can also obviously share it out. Share, because the mainstream media is also complicit. This is a systemic attempt to basically suppress this movement, because eating animals is at the very heart of the hierarchical system that we have. And if we start giving rights to animals, oh my gosh, things are going to change. So much empowerment, so much kindness, so much compassion. It won't be ruled by the 0.1%. And there will be much more of an equitable distribution of things like food. As somebody mentioned, we could end world hunger today if we stop feeding 80 billion animals, a very large percentage of the food we produce every year. That's my take. Let's do a round robin, starting with Donny Moss. Your final thoughts.
Jane, when you show the footage of the duck farm, those buildings in the background, even we describe them as factory farms. But when people hear the word farm, I think that they think of a bucolic setting, and a quote farmer. I don't even think we should be calling these factory farms. These are animal factories. Let's not even use the word farm anymore. Let's call them what they are, animal factories. Let's rebrand starting right now.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more. The word farm, we've all been conditioned to have old McDonald, blah, blah, blah. No, these are animal factories. Thank you. Thank you for that. Short, but really primo final thought. Lindsey Baker.
I think that this is the beginning of the end to factory farming. I think they need to wake up, start innovating instead of persecuting innocent people that are bringing to fore health risks for the people that work there, for all people that are eating meat or being around people that eat meat, and for all the other things, the conservation. We know all the reasons we should not eat meat. I think they need to get up to the what's going on now, move forward, not backwards. We're never going to be able to go backwards. We have to go forward. We have to go forward together. And I just want to say one more thing. I think there's a petition that we all can sign on the Direct Action website, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, you raise a very good point that I need to address. And that is that in the very same county, Direct Action Everywhere has a program ongoing right now to collect enough signatures to have on the ballot eliminating factory farms in Sonoma County. They've already raised more than 11,000 signatures, so they're well on their way. They're over a third there. But it's the very same county where this trial is happening. So while Wayne Hsiung is on trial, there's also a large group of people going out there and collecting signatures to ban, we're not going to use factory farms anymore, animal factories, to ban animal factories in Sonoma County. We'll see where that goes. Final thought, Ellen Dent.
Well, my final thought is, this trial just seems completely unfair so far, and that we have rights. Wayne has rights. All of these human beings that are risking their freedom have rights, and they're using those rights in order to get rights for other animals. So I'm just hoping for the day that we don't have to sit here, that we are not on trial for doing the right thing, which is rescuing other animals from, an existence that we can't even fathom. So I commend these activists for going to these farms, for going into these farms and exposing the cruelty that is happening there. I'm glad that we're talking about, the systemic issues that lead to this cruel situation. If you follow the money, it goes well past the farmers, even the corporations. It goes into governments and further than that. It's really a nightmare. The predatory loans, and just the whole corrupt nature of this system. So it needs to be exposed. The public needs to know, and I hope everybody shares this. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being on this panel, and thank you for speaking the truth.
Thank you, Ellen, for all your work. Yes, everybody's saying, Donny, they're loving animal factories, get rid of the whole word farm. But meanwhile, since this is something that has already existed in terms of a campaign, you can go to endfactoryfarming.vote, endfactoryfarming.vote if you want to get involved. All right, final thought, Michelle Celestino.
Well, I believe that there's definitely doubt now in the jury's mind. If I were a juror, I would be thinking that, and that we need to really look at the facts of what's going on. They could see behind what's being hidden from them, and that hopefully Wayne, with his eloquence and with the facts backing him, that he'll be able to prevail. And if not, the message of what's going on in this trial, the whole civil rights violations, which I think is happening, it's going to bring a bigger light to it and hopefully open the door to looking at what these animal factories are doing to the world and to our health and to the planet.
Wow, well said. Okay, Carla, get back to the courthouse. I know you need to go. Signing off. We'll see you when we resume our coverage. Thank you so much for all your hard work. All right, Nathan Semmel, your final thought.
I'm really looking forward to the defense presenting its case. I think it's going to shed a lot of light on what this case is really about. I think no matter the court's rulings, no matter how hard the prosecution tries to keep out certain evidence, I know Wayne's going to figure out a way to get some of it in. We still have the mistake of law defense and the 597E and all of that I think is going to really show this jury what this case really is about. And I think when it's all said and done, I think we're going to have another case to celebrate, and we're going to be grateful that the prosecution tried to pull a fast one and tried to strip this case down to its bare bones and by getting rid of the burglary charges and getting rid of the grand larceny charges and just try to prosecute this as the simplest case possible as a trespass. Because if we get another win under our belt for something as simple to prosecute as trespass that is essentially captured on video, it's going to send a resounding message to prosecutors across the country. And if we can't get the right to rescue to happen legislatively, then I think we can make it happen sort of in a backdoor approach, which is no prosecution is going to want to touch this. Maybe arrests will get made and then cases will get dismissed because they can't win. So I'm hoping that's going to happen here.
My final thought is that let's consider the bravery of Wayne Hsiung, willing to go to prison for 2 years, because that's what he's risking in order to make this point. So everybody who's watching, do your part, share out this video and download the Unchained TV streaming app. This is our nonprofit streaming app, the world's only a streaming app for animal rights and the plant-based lifestyle, available on your phone. You can download it for free, available for free on any Samsung Smart TV. Just go to the apps, the Smart Hub App Store, and download it. It's available also on any TV if you use an Amazon Fire Stick, a Roku device, or an Apple TV device. And you can also go to UnchainedTV.com and watch that way. I urge you all to do this. We don't have multi-million dollar marketing budgets. We need everybody who cares about animals, people, and the planet to get involved and download. It takes 1 second. Remember, Wayne Hsiung is facing 2 years in prison. All we're asking you to take a minute to download it. And once you download it, for example, on your phone, you can actually text this to somebody. So please do that part. I want to thank everybody for joining us here on this incredible panel, getting high marks from the comments. I appreciate all that you do, and we will be back with repeated live coverage of the California Animal Rescue Trial as it's underway. See you next time. Look for us. Bye.